Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what is making the headlines with the Observer's chief lead writer, Sonia Sodha, and the Daily Telegraph's chief political correspondent, Christopher Hope, who we are hoping, excuse the pun, who will join us shortly. He's having, well, Wi-Fi issues or something like that. Anyway, we'll find out soon. To the front pages then, let us start with the Eye, which declares the Tories put the PM on notice, commenting on the ongoing furore around parties, Boris Johnson's remarks to Sir Keir Starmer about Jimmy Savile, and Britain's role in the situation in Ukraine. The Guardian says the PM went to another Prosecco-fuelled leaving do for an aide at Number 10. The Times is leading with energy bill rebates to help against rising costs. The Metro reports on an investigation which discovered that racist, misogynistic and homophobic WhatsApp messages were sent by officers working at a police station in central London. The Telegraph hears that hormone replacement therapy will soon be sold over the counter. While the FT's international edition looks at the prospect of interest rate rises from the European Central Bank. And the Star says we can breathe a sigh of relief over a tea room classic. There we are. Well, a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages and the ones coming in soon of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's bring in Sonia Sodha. On her own? On none of them. Hey, and Christopher Hope, you're there. Hey. What marvellous news. We were hoping, obviously, that you would be there. Anyway, let's go straight to the Eye, shall we, both of you? You know, this is like a sort of a condition check of where the PM is right now, isn't it, Sonia?
Absolutely. So the Eye does what it does so well on many occasions, which is bring the day's political stories together and sort of give us an overall summary of what's going on. So it makes reference to developments in the Partygate scandal, which a couple of the other papers have got stories leading on, new revelations about new parties, concerns from very senior MPs about the impact that Johnson's domestic political crisis is having on his ability to represent Britain on a world stage at an absolutely critical moment for world affairs. So, you know, that's the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And then essentially the rumblings that are going on politically. We've seen that the Sue Gray report that came out, it was very much an interim report without concrete findings. It didn't have concrete revelations about what happened at the Downing Street parties, although it had some very tough words about cultures in Downing Street. But that has somewhat diffused, I think, the momentum around sort of backbench efforts to get Boris Johnson out of Downing Street immediately. But these conversations are rumbling on behind the scenes, and the Eye alludes to them as well. Yes,
it was General Lord Richard Dannett, wasn't it, who'd said that the swirling Partygate rumours were like a time bomb, and that, you know, in the world of foreign affairs, people would realise that. But let's go to The Guardian, shall we, Christopher? This is one of those allegations that was listed in Sue Gray's report that we did not know about. The Guardian suggesting they found out more.
That's right. There's allegations here in both The Guardian and the Telegraph tonight about Boris Johnson going to that party, the winner takes it all party, Anna, on the night that Dominic Cummings left Number
10, he was going to say, wasn't he? Yeah, those are two different things, aren't they? One of them was November the 13th, which was the winner takes it all party, the ABBA singing One in the flat. And the other one that we were talking about in The Guardian is one actually on the 14th of January, suggesting it was the departure of two Number 10 private secretaries. And The Guardian saying that Boris Johnson did attend what they call a Prosecco-fuelled leaving do for a Number 10 aide during that. Now, paper does go on to say it was only for 5 minutes, but does that make any difference?
I don't think so. I mean, gosh, it's just so hard to keep track of all these different parties and the soundtracks there were and what was being drunk. But I think it was inevitable that Sue Gray's report coming out and listing the events that she was investigating, that would lead to leaks about some of the ones that we don't know about. So as you said, Anna, there are some on that list that we don't know about. And I think, you know, we have to distinguish the sort of steady drip now about revelations from the political damage that this is doing to Boris Johnson. And it's I guess, quite easy to sort of be a bit complacent. Oh, another party that he went to, we already knew about, kind of, however many it was. I've actually lost track myself. But I think if we take a step back and look at the big picture, I think this drip is going to continue. But I think the damage, there's an irrevocable damage that's been done to the relationship between Boris Johnson and voters. And we've seen that in the opinion polls. If there's one thing the public really don't like when it comes to politicians, it's political hypocrisy. We saw that with the expenses scandal. We've seen it with this. And so it isn't really necessarily the detail about parties here. It's the fact that Boris Johnson didn't see fit, allegedly, to abide by the rules that he set for everyone else, and that many, many voters and citizens complied with at huge personal cost to themselves. Missing funerals, missing saying goodbye to loved ones, let alone, going to a work leaving do. So I think, we are going to continue to hear more, but I think the damage has already been done, to be honest.
Well, I mean, the date of some of these is really important, isn't it? The one that really upset a lot of people was the parties, the alleged parties before Prince Philip's funeral. And this one, just over a week after the second national lockdown, and within the same week, 1,820 people dead in one day. At that time, the most people dead. It's just the context of this, isn't it, I suppose? It's easy to sort of brush over them, but nobody's ever been able to tell us how and why anybody thought this was OK, Christopher.
Exactly. I think this idea that Andrew Mitchell talked about this idea of the lifeblood of the government leaching away into the sand. We want to see more from Boris Johnson, and we can't see it. It's almost a sorry, not sorry Prime Minister. And as soon as he starts to step up, I mean, we're waiting to see the shake-up. So far, the response to the Sugo report has been a new government department in number 10 Downing Street, and that's about it. It's not enough. But his friends in the Tory party tell me, unless he starts listening and recognising the problem, then nothing will change, and we'll have this repeated. I understand that more letters are going in tomorrow about Boris Johnson. I know who they are, that they won't confirm to me they're going in. I'm pretty sure they are going in. And these are kind of unknown Tory MPs.
If you were to say their names, how many roughly do you think?
As many as 3 tomorrow going in. That'll take it to known numbers going towards 12 or 13. These are not well-known people. They are backwoodsmen Tory MPs who've had enough. And there's a lot of those, really. And the problem for the PM might be the number might stumble over the 54 required and inadvertently trigger this no confidence vote in the PM.
Obviously, Boris Johnson said sorry in Parliament, did he not, on Monday? But then he came out fighting, accusing Keir Starmer of a tissue of nonsense, and then raising this Jimmy Savile accusation, which has been widely condemned, still continues in the papers. There's the Metro, Savile victims' fury, and has prompted quite a backlash. This did not go down well, even on the Tory benches, it seems, Sonia.
Well, it's just dreadful, really, because it's untrue. Whether or not to prosecute Jimmy Savile was not a decision that was taken by Keir Starmer when he was heading up the Crown Prosecution Service. But Boris Johnson said that it was in Parliament. And I think, I think the first thing to say is actually one of the most upsetting things about this story is what Jimmy Savile's victims have said about it, and they've come out and said how distressing it is for them to feel like their abuse is being used as a political football, being used by the Prime Minister of the country to effectively try and distract from the political crisis that he finds himself mired in. I think it's completely irresponsible, actually, and reprehensible. And, I think their words say it best, really. If you listen to some of what they've been saying today, it's just not OK for child sex abuse to be deployed as a political football by our Prime Minister.
Well, what's your feeling about this, Christopher? Because it was from the Donald Trump playbook, wasn't it, to deliberately say known untruths as truths. We're better than that in this country, aren't we?
He was playing the man, not the ball. It was very clunky watching it from the press gallery in the House of Commons. I mean, what happened was when Keir Starmer was in charge of the CPS, he did a review into all of this stuff. He had no actual say over charging or not charging of Savile. He did issue a statement in 2013 apologising for failings on behalf of the CPS for all prosecutors, not him. He had no say over the actual prosecution of Savile personally, and that's where it's so difficult, I think, for Johnson, because he's saying that Starmer in the Commons was involved. He wasn't. It felt clunky at the time. We all looked at each other thinking, what on earth is he talking about? Why is Savile involved in this conversation about Partygate? And I'm not surprised we're seeing here on Metro page 5 that the victims of Savile are really upset, because it wasn't really anything to do with Partygate. It certainly wasn't. I mean, it's almost absurd and offensive to do that, I think.
And so to Ukraine, he went today, as we saw. The Telegraph reporting on its front page, and no doubt plenty of pages inside too, that Johnson has sent a stark message to the Kremlin. The Western sanctions will hit Moscow as soon as the first Russian towcap crosses into Ukraine. You know, typical use of Boris Johnson language there, I suppose. Are they getting anywhere, do you think? Are they making any headway?
I think it's very difficult to know, and I genuinely think this is a sort of situation, actually, where it's quite difficult to know exactly what will deter President Putin from doing what he wants to do. And I think, sort of Britain and allies have really stepped up in terms of sending reinforcements to countries neighbouring Ukraine, to Ukraine itself. But it is one of these sort of situations where I think you're on the brink of a conflict, and it's quite hard to know exactly what action to take with a player like President Putin. The thing I will say, though, and it comes back to sort of Johnson being quite distracted by what's going on at home, that really does undermine, I think, Britain on the world stage. We had the Prime Minister having to move his call with the Kremlin from Monday to Wednesday, tomorrow, basically because he was too busy going to Parliament to talk about the Partygate scandal and the Sue Gray report. So I do think he is distracted, and that's obviously not good. And we saw the president of the US, his press secretary today, sort of crack a joke when she was asked about whether what the president might make of what's going on in the UK, and she said, well, the president has never been accosted by a cake. And obviously that's quite a humorous way of dealing with that, but I do think it's quite revealing, actually, of how the rest of the world is looking on as the UK just becomes absolutely mired in this.
To The Guardian now, Christopher. It's levelling up's big day, isn't it? What does that mean in this context?
Well, we'll find out tomorrow, Anna, when the Levelling Up white paper is published by Michael Gove. He, of course, is the Levelling Up secretary. It's an idea, levelling up, which you might argue is what all government should do, lift opportunity for all. An idea which Boris Johnson came out with in about November 2019, and it's taken until now to find out what it is. But a lot of Tories are hoping that this will define what Johnsonism is, finally, that idea of what does Boris Johnson stand for, because the mandate in 2019 was for Boris Johnson personally, less so the Tory party, but for him personally. But the problem with a lot of politics is no one knows what he believes or stands for. This might show us tomorrow. The front page, the Telegraph is saying there that Gove will unveil levelling up pledges that will become law. So we're back to that idea that, forget me saying as a minister, it'll be law. Therefore, it will stay in statute for Labour to follow. Well, I doubt Labour will argue with much of this when Lisa Nandy stands up to take on Michael Gove tomorrow at the dispatch box. The hope is it'll be something. So far, I've been pretty unimpressed by the leaks and the briefings so far. So the hope is this can deliver something for what the Tories promised in 2019.
The Telegraph saying that a dozen pledges to level up Britain are to be enshrined in law to try to set the government's agenda for the rest of the decade. Mr Gove, the levelling up secretary, compared the UK to a jet firing on only one engine and pledged to return government focus to overlooked and undervalued communities. His policy document runs to about 350 pages and is the culmination of months of work by him and his levelling up task force led by Andy Haldane, former chief economist at the Bank of England. 350 pages. They clearly know what it means then. Sonia?
Well, possibly, but I think the criticism of this agenda is, first of all, it involves a lot of stuff that the government's already announced, a lot of money that the government's already announced. We're being told about this new approach, which is legislating for targets to close the gap. legislating doesn't really doesn't make much difference unless you've got substantive policies in place. And the real problem is that actually, if you look at the government's policy in the round, it tugs against levelling up. So when you look, for example, at the tax credit cuts that we've seen over the last decade by Conservative chancellors, some low-paid parents have lost thousands of pounds a year as a result of that. When we look at cuts to public services, particularly services for vulnerable children, for older people, for example, cuts to government grants to local authorities have really hit the least affluent areas of the country the most. And then you've got the effects of Brexit, and all the economic predictions suggest that Brexit and the costs to trade that happen as a result of us leaving the European Union in quite an abrupt way will make themselves felt on the least affluent areas of the country. So the government's got a massive problem, which is that what a lot of the government has been doing has been tugging against levelling up, and now it's coming up with a levelling up agenda with a lot of reheated cash, which isn't really going to do very much to counteract all.
Apologies, we're running out of time. I do apologise. It does talk about 4G coverage and a nationwide gigabyte-capable broadband, which would help you, Christopher, as well with your Wi-Fi issues as well. We'll see you soon, Sonia, Christopher. Thank you both very much indeed. Let's